Okay, now let's move on to the next critic and his work. Before we move on, speaks about close reading. Close reading is all about the autotelic nature of the text. All you have to do is you have to read. You don't have to depend on the author's intention nor the reader's interpretation. All you have to do is look at the language that the text gives you. Look at the forms, the symbols, the metaphors, the rhyme, meter, point of view, setting, characterization, plot, and all those. That's all that you need. Those formal elements are all that you need to judge your work. You don't have to look at the intention of the author nor the reader's interpretation. This is close reading. Okay, and the new critics, they stressed on close reading. Now come to the next paragraph, that is Heresy of Paraphrase. Now what is Heresy of Paraphrase? Now paraphrasing, you know what paraphrasing is. And what is heresy? Heresy is again something that is not good, again an error. It is something that can lead to a mistake. It's not good. So another important critic is Cleanth Brooks. Cleanth Brooks, in his famous work Well-Wrought Urn, studies the structure of poetry. Or Well-Wrought Urn, the full title of the book is Well-Wrought Urn, Studies in the Structure of Poetry. There he studies the structure of poetry and what constitutes poetry. Thus, this title is taken from the metaphysical poet John Donne and his poem Canonization. Now, he has also written another important work, and that is Keats' Sylvian Historian. Again, the whole title is History Without Footness, and it's on Ode on a Grecian Urn. And the third book is Language of Paradox. Now, why I gave you all the three books is because all the concepts that we are going to deal, the concepts that we have, that he has given, is to deal with these books that he has written. So the first one is Paradox and Heresy of Paraphrase. So first we'll look into what paradox and irony is according to him, and then we will move on to the next topic, that is Heresy of Paraphrase. Now paradox, this concept, now again that is there in your textbook. First he starts with Heresy of Paraphrase, and then he comes to paradox. So first we will start with paradox and irony, and then we'll move to Heresy of Paraphrase. So it is in page number 42. If any of you are confused, turn to page number 42 of your textbook, the last two paragraphs. Okay, all right. So this concept, that is paradox and irony, is talked of in the language of paradox. The new critics value irony in a broader sense. It indicates a text's inclusion of varying perspectives on the same character and events. Brooks analyzed several poems from different historical backgrounds, from different historical eras. And he establishes that he establishes the crucial role of paradox. He says that paradox is the language of poetry, and it is inevitable to poetry. Poetry cannot exist without paradox. And he analyzes this, or he has come to this conclusion after analyzing and closely observing various texts, various poems from various historical backgrounds. So what is paradox? Paradox is when two opposite meanings are talked about. It is a statement that contradicts itself, but represents At the same time, it represents the actual way things are. This working is portrayed, or he illustrates the working of paradox in two works. One is William Wordsworth's Lines Composed upon Westminster Bridge, where Brooks states that the writer is able to, that is Wordsworth, is able to appreciate the beauty of the industrialized London just as he appreciates nature. This is because, according to Wordsworth, London is a part of nature, and because it was man who built London or the city, and man being a part of nature, London, something that he has made, turns into a part of nature, and therefore London is looked upon as a part of nature itself, because it was built by man, because man is a part of nature, and therefore the poet is able to appreciate the beauty of both man-made objects as well as nature. Clear? So there is a paradox. Nature is always beautiful. He brings together two contrasting ideas, two contrasts, right? So man-made objects were and the as a part of nature. And man-made objects are not a part of nature. You all know that. But he brings together these two concepts. So these contrasts are shown, vividly shown in the poem Composed upon Westminster Bridge. Then Lines Composed upon Westminster Bridge by Wordsworth. Next poem that he speaks about is John Donne's Canonization, in which Cleanth Brooks says that there is paradox used as an underlined metaphor. This is because the speaker, that is Donne, is speaking of his physical love, his love making to his beloved. Okay, and he considers this love making, that is the physical relationship between a man and a woman, as saintly. Now, saints do not indulge themselves in physical relationship. Donne presents the two lovers as appropriate candidates for canonization. So there is physical love and religion intertwined together. And it is complex. It is a complex conceit. So by the use of these two literary terms, Brooke tries to show that language of poetry is paradox. Poetry cannot exist without paradox. Any poem you look at it, Brooks states that there is paradox working. And it is inevitable to poetry. Poetry becomes beautiful because of the use of paradox. So what he basically focuses is on the words of the text, and thereby he finds the use of paradox working. Now there is also he had to face a criticism by the new Aristotelians. Now, who are new Aristotelians? New Aristotelians, will be speaking about new Aristotelians also. New Aristotelians were the ones who critiqued the new critics. They went against the new critics. That's a new idea that is going to come up very soon, that we'll be discussing. Now, a very important critic of the new Aristotelians, or neo-Aristotelians as they call themselves, R.S. Crane. He criticized Cleanth Brooks in his work Critical Monism of Cleanth Brooks, where he argues that Brooke focuses a lot on paradox. Hence, Brooks ignores other poetic figures and imagination. He also says that since Brooks focuses on the paradox in poetry, he is ignoring the power of paradox. He takes paradox very lightly. He is just too much obsessed with paradox that he does not understand, or he tries to observe it, or he tries to see it only in poetry. Paradox works in our day-to-day concept or day-to-day conversation also. Like for instance, if you look at the scientific formula, Einstein's formula, where E is equal to mc2, where matter is equal to, that is matter is equal to energy, matter and energy are the same, is it not? This is a paradox when you are trying to equate energy and matter together. It happens not just in poetry but also in everyday language, right? So when you can also try to figure out or think about the paradox working in your language, when you in your day-to-day conversation. When you speak, you will find the contrast of two opposing ideas or two opposing ideas or thoughts working together when you speak in your day-to-day conversation also. Now, so that's with paradox and irony. Paradox and irony work together. You will find this paradox working in Gray's Elegy. Now, he quotes Gray's Elegy to show how the questions are answers and vice versa. So there is a paradox. Questions becomes the answer itself. Like for instance, turn to page number 43. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Now those are lines from Elegy by Thomas Gray. Elegy written in the country churchyard. Now if you look at the first line here, can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? That's in the form of a question, but this question serves as an answer, so it's a paradox. Okay, it's a rhetorical question and the answer is implied, so it's a paradox, right? Now if you go further, if you look at the poem, so other poems as well, you will find the working of paradox according to Cleanthes Brooks. Now, Cleanthes Brooks also states that see here in page 43, the form is that of a question, but the manner in which the question has been asked shows that it is no true question at all. The answer is already given. The answer is implied there itself. It's a rhetorical question. The next one that he speaks about is ambiguity. And ambiguity occurs when a word or an image or event generates two or more different meanings. Now, one famous example of ambiguity would be good fences make good neighbors, right? So it has a lot of multiple meanings in it. We might agree to it, some may not agree to it. There's a different way of interpreting it as well. Now, if you look at Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Act 3, Scene 1, you will find Mercutio bleeding to death. Okay, and while bleeding to death, he says grimly, "Ask for me tomorrow and you shall find a grave man." So here you see that Shakespeare is playing a pun on the word grave. He uses pun and it has multiple meanings. When Mercutio is bleeding to death, he says, "Ask for me and you shall find me a grave man." The author is playing upon the word grave, which means very important, or more recently very serious. Okay, it is also used as a noun which stands for the synonym of tomb. So two ways in which he is trying to tell you, or two ways of interpreting it, that it has an ambiguous meaning, or it gives multiple meaning in it. One, you will find me a very serious person. Another, you will find me in the tomb. So he's playing with the word grave. Okay, so that's one thing of ambiguity. And now let's move on to Heresy of Paraphrase. Now, Heresy of Paraphrase. What is paraphrase? Paraphrase is, in simple terms, means summary. So heresy is an error. It is wrong. So whenever we try to summarize a poem, we are committing a big mistake. This concept is talked of by Cleanth Brooks in his work Well Wrought On. In a chapter titled Heresy of Paraphrase, he speaks about its ill effects. It is injustice. Cleanth Brooks speaks of the other new critics who began summarizing each and every word of the text. So this was like a critique to the new critics itself. Many of the new critics started to go upon, or they tried to summarize the work of the text. In doing so, what happens is the value of the text is lost. So here he is warning his co-critics against committing an error. He believes that an excellent poem or a novel cannot be condensed to 2 or 3 pages. Reading Paradise Lost, for example, is totally different from reading the summary of Paradise Lost. It is different. When you read the summary of Paradise Lost, you get to understand the plot. You get to understand the story. Okay, this is what Milton has intended by writing Paradise Lost. But you will never be able to paraphrase or summarize what the forms in the text, the beauty that it has, or the impact it has on the reader when he reads the text cannot be summarized in a paraphrase, in a summary. So you don't get the artistic pleasure. You get it only when you read the poem or the text. So when you summarize a poem in his or her or in your words, we mustn't forget that what you summarize is your words. When you write a summary of a particular poem, you are not writing the exact words used by the poet or the writer, rather you are using your words. So the impact it has on you is totally different from the impact that you get upon reading the original text. So he is warning people from paraphrasing a poem. Okay, so it is an injustice to the poem or the work as such. So the words used by Wordsworth are going to create a greater impact than the words used by you or me in a summary. So according to Cleanth Brooks, form and content are inseparable from the poem. Whenever you summarize a poem or a work, you get only the content. You cannot get the form. Okay, you will not be able to summarize the form, the beauty and the way the poem is introduced or written by the poet. And therefore you are reducing the poem to what? To a prose, to nothing more than few words that were written by you in 2 or 3 pages. You are reducing a beautiful poem into prose. And it is not a scientific composition, right? It is not something to be written, or a poem is a poem and it cannot be changed into prose, or you cannot summarize it to prose. It is not a scientific composition. It is filled with emotion. And whenever you paraphrase it, the emotional effect or the dramatic effect that a poem has is lost. So therefore, Cleanth Brooks states that a poem consists of form and its content. So when you try to paraphrase a poem, you get only the content. the form is lost, the beauty is lost, the artistic pleasure is lost. Clear? And it does not have, it fails to bring any impact on the reader, and therefore he is warning his co-critics against paraphrase. Okay, so that is Heresy of Paraphrase, page 42, third paragraph. All right, okay, and next we move on to the next concept that we will be dealing with is tension. Tension is a concept by Alan Tate. Now, tension, a literary text becomes very complex with the use of tension, which when broadly defined means linking together of opposites. In its simplest form, tension is created by the integration of the abstract and the concrete of a general idea using specific images. This concept was brought forward by Alan Tate, and according to him, if you come to page 43, last paragraph, okay, yeah, towards the last few lines of page 43. So according to him, there are two kinds of meanings. They are denotative meaning and connotative meaning. Denotative meaning is the surface meaning and connotative is the hidden meaning. Okay, denotative is used to create. So denotative refers to the dictionary meaning of a term. Connotation refers to the implied meaning. So denotative meaning, surface meaning, base meaning. Connotative meaning, the implied meaning or deeper or deep or hidden meaning. Now denotative is used to analyze the superficial meaning in poetry. That is the base meaning or the surface meaning in poetry. For example, Robert Fisher. Okay, Robert Fisher has written a beautiful poem called Seasons. Now, Season. So here he uses the denotative meaning, and it's not there in your text. I was just giving you an example. You can check it up in Google. You can just Google search it. It was there in CBSE textbook, and I found the poem a brilliant poem, a beautiful poem, so explicitly written. He was a journalist turned author. So Robert Fisher, Season. So denotative meaning, it refers to changes in nature. If you look at the poem, the denotative meaning shows the changes that is happening in nature during various seasons. Okay, he starts with spring season and then comes to summer, autumn, and last winter. Okay, so he describes, there is nothing more about it than the description of various seasons. It is like when a small child, say a 6th standard or a 5th standard child reads the poem, he or she reads it as an observation of nature, the beautiful nature. But if we are to read the poem, we first, the denotative meaning or the superficial meaning or the base meaning is the observation or the close observation of nature that the poet has had. At the same time, when we can also move to the connotative meaning of the text, which means the connotative meaning is a hidden meaning, the symbols, and it can become very allegorical also. If you look at the poem that I told you about, the poem, if you look at the connotative meaning, or the hidden meaning or the implied meaning, it speaks about the cycle of life, our life, the symbols they have, and the metaphors that he has used to denote life. Spring stands for birth, autumn stands for the peak period or the youth, summer stands for the peak period or the youth, and autumn stands for the middle ages, and the winter stands for old age and death. And finally the poem ends with a hope for rebirth or hope for spring season. So it's the cycle, you can see the life cycle there. It looks very simple, it is only apparently simple, but you can, when you read the poem, you will be able to understand that there is something deeper or implied in that poem. So the base meaning or the denotative meaning would be all about the seasons, the poet's observation of the various seasons, the beautiful seasons, and how they are depicted. The connotative meaning is the implied meaning, where it stands for the life cycle. Okay, all right. So according to Alan Tate, only poetry, that is good poetry, which is able to communicate both connotative and denotative, can be considered they can be considered good. Those poems which gives only denotative meaning are not good, or they are not great poems. They don't make great poems. The connotative, it is a combination of both denotative and connotative meaning. I hope you understood. So denotative means base, superficial meaning, and connotative means what? The implied meaning. Again, if you take Gulliver's Travels, when you read Gulliver's Travels, it is like a children's book. That's the denotative meaning, right? But when you look deeper, when you try to find out the hidden meaning of the text, you will find that it is a comment or a critique on the British, the government of the day as such. So there you understand the connotative and the denotative and connotative meaning. Okay, and likewise you have all the poems of Robert Frost. You have studied Birches. So again, Birches has got both denotative and connotative meaning. So apparently it looks simple. It is only apparently simple. To a small child, he takes only the denotative meaning, but as you move on, you understand that it has a very connotative meaning as well. Okay, now the next concept. Now I wanted to tell you what denotative and connotative mean. Only after that we can take the concept of tension. Tension in poetry. Now what is this tension in poetry? Now how can we judge a good poem from a bad one? What he does is he uses the two words intention and extension, and what he does is he cuts off the prefixes of the two words in and x. In and x are cut off, and what you get the same words, right? Tension. So this word tension is what makes a successful poem. A successful poem is always in a state of tension. Tension, therefore, is the life of a poem. Tension, therefore, is our life too, right? If we are very happy all the time, that is also not good, becomes very monotonous, right? And if you're sad all the time also, it becomes very monotonous. So it should have an equilibrium. Just kidding. Now here, what he means is this concept tension is spoken of in his book, The Man of Letters in the Modern World. It is a combination of two words, extension and intention, and extension means denotative meaning. That's why I told you denotative and connotative meaning. Extension is what we call denotative meaning. That means superficial meaning, meaning or the base meaning. Okay, and intention or intensive or intention, extension, intention, extension. Intention is the connotative meaning, the deeper or hidden meaning. Extension, denotative, base meaning. Intention, connotative, hidden meaning. Okay, so what does he do? He cuts off intention the prefixes of intention and extension. It comes to a state of tension. Tension is what makes good poetry. What does it mean? What does tension mean? Tension means a combination of denotative and connotative meaning, a combination of extension and intention together. Okay, now page 43 again. 43, and you have the second paragraph. Finally, the complexity of a literary text is created by tension, which broadly defined means the linking together of opposite. Okay, and read all that, the whole paragraph. So to get a good poem, a text must have tension, which means it must have both denotative and connotative meaning, or it must have the extensive or intensive meaning, extension or intention. So according to the new critics, the multiple meaning produced in the text by paradoxes, ironies, tensions, ambiguities must be resolved. Finally, it should be resolved. It should be harmonized by their shared contribution to the theme. So finally, when you read it, like for instance, I told you Robert Fisher's poem Seasons, when you read the poem, it's all these complex metaphors, the metaphors that he has used, the tensions that he has used, the ambiguity that he has used, the paradoxes and ironies he has used, it should be able to give me the meaning, or should be able to make me understand the theme. I'm not trying to tell you about the author's intention. I'm telling you about how the words conjure up images or produces an understanding of that poem in my mind. Clear? Close reading or detailed examination of complex relationship between the text, formal details and its theme is how the text's organic unity is established according to the new critics. So that's about it. We move on to the next important critics in our later videos, in the next class. So till then, thank you and keep safe.
Dastan.